Hello, I'm Ann James, and this is my senior thesis artist talk. The first time I ever cared about creating was in 5th grade when my friend showed me a cat they had drawn. This small moment of childhood envy convinced me to pick up a pencil and draw. However, my initial act of creating was a selfish one, only caring about how I viewed and interacted with my work, missing the point of what my friend had done by showing me the work, and continuing to miss the point until high school when I was more properly introduced into the art world. I began to notice that art wasn't the act of looking into oneself alone, but the act of reaching out to others through your work. However, I also became aware that art had certain standards and rules. Only certain art was valued. The art that was valued was glossy, highly rendered, or beautiful, and anything outside of these seemed to be rejected. When I think of artists who achieved these standards, I think of Kincaid, Kuhn, and Kapoor, all artists who meet these standards and excel at these standards, but ignore and reject certain people through their work. The first artist is Kuhn. His work is awe-inspiring, sleek, aesthetic. However, it falls into what he was originally critiquing, consumerism. His work no longer cares about what it was critiquing, as it now only cares about being sold and being sellable. His work is also extremely expensive to make, needing precise machinery and expensive materials to make, caring only about the price tag that it costs to make them and for people to consume them. This drives a further wedge between the viewer and the artist. The next is Kincaid. Kincaid makes beautifully rendered scenes. However, his scenes are made for the sole purpose of being a standard and being sold as something commercial. There's nothing to critique in his work. It's only idyllic and pretty. Though his work is good, it only falls into traditional standards of art. Only those who are good at highly rendering work, making pretty things, are artists in this line of sight. The next is Kapoor. Kapoor is one of the most influential artists of this time. However, his work focuses on prestige and cost alone. Though at times it can be visceral and moving to see, most of it costs the same amount as a small family home. He also disregards user input, hating the name The Bean for his famous Cloudgate, and buying the rights to the pigment Vanta Black when it was originally released, disallowing anyone else to use it. When I think of these artists, I think of people who are very successful and skilled, but I think of these people as people who don't want the public to interact with their work in a visceral and connected way, that only care about the price tag on their work and only care about pretty things. To combat this, I, in my own practice, avoid using these traditional methods of artwork. I create an impulse, either with a specific topic in mind or by allowing my mind to bring forth subconscious thoughts and create freely. This allows my work to be accessible to everyone, but also multi-leveled. My work ranges from several different forms, from collage to painting to sculptural works. I use simple, bold lines, simple objects that are found in everyday homes, or I reflect on the figure to allow people to easily connect to my work. However, my practice was not created alone, but inspired by several other artists. All these artists have playful art, have art that is easy to digest and look at and connects with everyday people. The first one is Jean-Michel Basquite, or Basquite, depending on how you pronounce it. His work is bold-lined, movement-filled, colorful, and it focuses on the graffiti aesthetic to allow everyone to connect to it, as we've all seen graffiti. However, he elevates this work by focusing on his life as a minority man and on the dichotomies of everyday life. Keith Haring was also a street artist like Basquite. However, his work didn't stay in the streets for long. Though he started with chalk murals in subways or on building sides, the American public was enthralled with his work. It was bold-lined, bright, and movement-filled, which allowed people to connect to the style easily and digest it easily. However, his work is innately political, critiquing nuclear power and bombs, and critiquing the government's lack of acknowledgement and aid during the AIDS crisis. Mr. Doodle is a still living artist who expressly makes for the idea of play. His work is bright-colored, bold-lined, and all-consuming in some sense. Though he's more commercial than the previous two artists, he focuses on elevating non-traditional art. His recent work focuses on critics who said his work was not art and mimics traditional art pieces in a playful mock at this idea. These as inspirations for my work, I intend my art to have similar accessibilities. The foundations of modern art are built on a class and academic divide, only allowing those who are rich enough to engage with and input their own ideas in art. My art reflects these grievances in several parts of the piece. Traditional art is mocked first and foremost by famous figures. These figures are painted in such a way to bring forth the notion to the viewer that the art can achieve a traditional standard and is not bitter that it cannot. But the art chooses not to meet these standards all the time for a reason. These figures are also selected for specific purposes. The figures in these paintings are all idyllic women, but they're also all sex objects, regardless of the trauma their paintings allude to. By removing them from their original paintings and allowing a new narrative to be made for these women, norms for women in art is being questioned. The rape of these women is no longer necessary and beautiful, but something that they deserve to be removed from. That's where the felt boards start to play their role. The figures are mounted to felt, thus allowing them to be placed in frames on the walls, and thus allowing the viewer to directly input their own influence over this traditional work and this newly formed work. The felt board is an object used to teach children and can be seen as a window to which basic knowledge of the world is taught. Thus, the viewer and subsequent interactor is reteaching the basics of art to themselves and others. The viewer can now teach what they think art should be and learn what others think art should be as well. Or they can simply play with the board, another valid use. The frames themselves and the objects outside the central figures also try to drive home this notion that art does not have to meet a certain standard and that art does not have to be a certain way. It can be what you have, what you create. The frames are mismatched, damaged, and still good. The objects are a collage of different mediums and magazine clippings. Realistic, unreal, out of proportion, in proportion, well-made, and poorly made. There's not a right way to use these objects. There's not a right way to view these frames. It does not have to be perfect to be a thing that is good and cherished. It does not have to fit a certain definition. Thus, by doing all this, I and the viewers are starting to recontextualize the past and present works and past and present ideals of art and their rules. We allow new meaning to be given to art that was once locked away. So connecting with people is the goal of this work. Every aspect of the piece attempts to do this. By giving people the hands-on chance to interact with and critique art, the artist becomes someone who bridges the divide between past, now, and then, and seeks to demand old values be reconsidered. So go, teach, and be taught, and play with the felt boards. Thank you.